All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our Jamf Connect interactive lab session, Streamlined Identity Workflows with Jamf Connect for macOS. Hope you enjoyed the keynote and ready for some more good stuff. So I'm going to pause here for just a brief moment for you to review our forward-looking statement. This is also available for a detailed review if you'd like under the resources. Okay, so my name is Kaylee Carlson. I'm the Product Marketing Manager for Jamf Connect, and I'm joined today by Mike Vandelinder, our Technical Product Manager for Jamf Connect. In today's interactive lab, I will kick things off by touching on what Jamf Connect is, why it's important for those of you that might not be familiar with the product. Then I will pass it over to Mike to give you an overview of the latest version of Jamf Connect. And from there, we'll move into a brief demo, and then you get to experience Jamf Connect for yourself on your virtual machine. So please let us know if you do have questions at any time as we go through this lab, and we'll do our best to answer them. So let's refresh on Jamf Connect. So again, many of you may be familiar with Jamf Connect, but for those of you that are not, Jamf Connect is a provisioning, authentication, and identity management solution for Mac that gives end users the power to leverage their cloud identity to gain immediate access to the resources they need to be productive and just to get all of their work done. So how is this accomplished? So right now we are living in a remote working world, right? So with account provisioning and authentication, IT can implement a more streamlined zero-touch deployment strategy by securing the login process and enforcing multi-factor authentication on pre-provisioned devices for employees on day one that they receive those devices. This simple yet secure login experience allows users to gain access to the business critical apps that they need to be productive each day based on that single set of credentials. So when using Jamf Connect with a cloud identity provider such as Okta or Microsoft Azure AD, remote employees can enjoy this simple, secure onboarding experience on their Mac. So Jamf Connect's identity management capabilities allow IT to maintain security and compliance standards across all of their devices by enforcing password policies via the cloud identity permissions, while also monitoring what devices are being accessed and by whom, adding that extra layer of security and keeping remote employees and hardware protected. And then finally, password sync. So Gartner reports that roughly 40% of all help desk tickets are for password resets. Because Jamf Connect keeps a user's cloud-based identity in sync with their local Mac account at all times, IT has really seen a dramatic reduction on these help desk tickets, saving them time and ensuring that employees can stay productive. So why is a tool like Jamf Connect important? I think that we all recognize that the days of a 9-to-5 workday exclusively from an office are coming to an end, as work is no longer confined by place and by time. In fact, in a 2019 study published by Talent LMS, 66% of organizations allowed employees to work remote, and 16% of all employees worked remote full-time. In today's world, in the face of the pandemic and its after effects, these numbers are only going to continue to grow as more organizations than ever before are examining their remote and work from home policies, be it for health, for employee retention, or productivity reasons. What's making this possible is the evolving role of digital technology to improve business processes, to enhance employee experiences, and to stay connected with one another. So to that end, Jamf Connect allows a user to unbox their Apple device, power it on, and access all of their apps after signing in with a single set of cloud identity credentials, removing that friction and keeping employees productive. So Jamf Connect integrates with and supports cloud identity providers Okta, Microsoft Azure AD, Google Cloud Identity, one login, IBM Security Verify, and Ping Federate. So coverage and support for a majority of the cloud IDPs used today in commercial enterprise organizations and also education. And for those of you that might be using Jamf Pro, Jamf Connect integrated with Jamf Pro earlier this year by making Jamf Connect configurations available within Jamf Pro. So that really reduces the number of tools and steps to deploy or edit a configuration, overall making setup and management easier if you're, again, also using Jamf Pro as your MDM. And that integration will continue to evolve for an easier, better together experience in the future. So speaking of a better experience, I'm going to pass it over to Mike to talk about the next iteration of Jamf Connect.
Awesome. Thanks, Kaylee. So we're really excited to begin talking about and teaching everyone about the new Jamf Connect. The team has been working hard, and it's great to finally get to share that with you today. So I'm going to sum up what's new in Connect through 3 themes. Jamf Connect's easier to use, easier to deploy, and easier to manage. So what's new? First, we're introducing a brand new user experience for the login window, one that feels refreshed and at home on the Mac. We've taken our sync and verify applications and replaced them both with a brand new Connect app that combines their features, but works with all of our supported identity providers through that one app. And without the need for maintaining multiple menu bar applications, we've simplified installation by consolidating everything, our login window and menu bar app, into a single deployment package for updates and management. So Jamf Connect provides a login window plugin on the Mac, and it makes it possible for users to authenticate to their cloud identity provider in order to provision themselves new local user accounts on the Mac or to sign into their existing accounts. Our interface adapts to multiple workflows for signing into the Mac, making it possible for users to log in through a familiar web interface in the case of OpenID Connect providers, as well as providing an updated interface for Okta-based or offline login. For OpenID Connect providers, in particular, we've introduced a new visual step indicator. Displayed at the top of the screen, it's there to help guide users through the multi-step login process that's required to authenticate and then validate their local passwords. We're able to account for a new local login workflows and present messages to the users during login, all while maintaining much of the customization that our customers love. With the new Jamf Connect, we've consolidated our client app installers into a single installer package. Not only does this make it easier for admins to have everything they need to deploy Jamf Connect, it also means that moving forward, there's no confusion about version numbers or having to know which app to use with your chosen identity provider. Management can get easier as we've changed how our launch agents are installed for the apps, reducing the need to modify deployment packages with each update. And we've also removed our browser extensions. Which gets us to, finally, a new app. So Connect is a new app that replaces both Sync and Verify for all of our customers. It combines the feature sets of both and is compatible with all of our supported identity providers. We're still able to sync passwords in the background. And again, no need to know the nuanced differences between our products because it's all in one place. So now that you have an idea of what's new with Jamf Connect, I'm going to take a couple minutes just to show you what some of these changes look like. After I've had a chance to show you Connect with my own accounts, we're going to take a brief recess to give you all a chance to sign into your demo environment. At that point, we'll come back and I'll once again walk us through a number of scenarios in Jamf Connect that you can follow along with in your demo environment. Great. So here I am on my desktop, and I want to give you a quick overview of what's new in Jamf Connect. Let me start with the installer. So admins for Connect are familiar with downloading the disk image from our Jamf Nation assets. Inside the disk image, we had a few packages, and it wasn't always clear what should be used from the start. There were installers for Jamf Connect Login, Jamf Connect Sync, Jamf Connect Verify, our Jamf Connect configuration application. We also had launch agents, browser extensions, and a few sample configuration profiles. What we have now is a single installer package for admins to upload, deploy, or install on their managed Macs. And then a copy of the Jamf Connect configuration app for admins so they can drag and drop the app to install it in their own applications folder. If I double click and open up the installer and step through it here, What we'll see is that both Login and the new Connect app are included in the same installer. There's an option to install just one or the other if need be, and we finally completely removed the browser extensions. So a couple things. I have both Jamf Connect and Jamf Connect configuration down here on my dock. Now as an end user, I would only ever have Connect installed, but as an admin, why not both? So let me close out of that and open up configuration. And to start with Jamf Connect configuration, this is the utility that we provide for admins to create and test their Connect configurations locally without having to deploy to the client devices first. So there's a number of ways to create configurations and manage settings for Jamf Connect. Jamf Pro admins can create their profiles all within the Jamf Pro console, but we included our own configuration utility in the box, so to speak, to make testing all that much easier. When you get to your demo environment, you'll find that we've preloaded all the configurations that we'll be using during this lab within configuration. So first up, what's new in Jamf Connect configuration is this sidebar to help organize your collections of settings. And what I'd like to do when I'm creating profiles is to keep separate configurations for each of the apps and for each of the identity providers. And that makes testing just that much easier. Now, if we look in the bottom left here and click the plus button to create a new configuration profile, you'll see that when we go to select one of the identity providers, that will then provide a list of the required settings to support that provider. Also, as your cursor rolls over any of the titles or any of these text fields, you'll see some helper text with descriptions as well as specific names that you can reference inside the Connect admin guide. So if you need a quick refresher on what these settings can accomplish, we have included a link to the admin guide. If you go up to the help menu and just simply click on Jamf Connect Help. So a couple great things about configuration. You'll see at the bottom that there's an option to choose license. And this will actually let you embed your mobile configuration license file within your other configurations for Connect if you don't want to maintain them separately for a reason. Now, when I click on any one of our saved configurations, we can see that I've got a number of these values already filled out. And if I had any questions about what all is configured here, or if I just wanted to simply dig in a little deeper, we have this new button in the upper right-hand corner. And this will actually toggle an XML view of your configuration profile. So what I find super helpful here is that if I know a specific key value that I want to add or change, well, this text view is also editable. The other thing to check out in our XML view is how the new profiles for the Connect app specifically are formatted. Preference keys have been renamed and organized into categories, and we're hoping that this makes your Connect profiles not only easier to read, but also easier to create. So when I think that I have a configuration that's more or less complete, I can click on Test in the upper right-hand corner. And there's options for which experience I need to test. There's an OpenID Connect login via WebView, or if I need to test the ability to validate passwords via Passwords Credential Grant, I've got both of those here. So they're great ways to validate that the apps you registered in your identity provider are hooked up and ready to go. So I'm going to give our demo configuration settings a quick test here by signing in with one of my own accounts. Perfect. So everything's successful. We're seeing that we're getting our access and ID tokens back from the identity provider. As an admin, if I wanted to look and see what types of information are being reported back to Connect from the identity provider, different attributes like names, email address, roles, you can browse through all of those attributes here to make kind of validating and getting that information later a lot easier. The other thing that we can do inside of configuration is we have the ability to import your existing profiles for Connect. So if you have any issues with formatting or listing unsupported keys in your existing profiles, when you go to import them in the new configuration application, you're going to see messages to alert you to that fact during the import process. And again, if I feel like this is a good configuration and I want to be able to maybe go through deployment with it, then I can just go up to File, click on Save, and we'll get a save dialog with options for exporting profiles for either the login window or for the Connect application. You can also see that we can choose between mobile configuration profile or a plist file. Either is fine. Both can be uploaded to Jamf Pro. But with configuration profiles in particular, we also have the ability to sign that profile with a specific certificate when you go to export it. So I'm going to close out a configuration, and let's just switch gears here to the main star, which is Connect itself. So Connect is a new app where we've brought together the previous sync and verify applications to form a single menu bar application. And that means we have one app for all of our different supported identity providers. If I click on the Connect menu, you can see an assortment of menu options. All are customizable. All are able to be hidden by administrators and configurations. So you can really give Connect the look and feel that's right for you and your users, even down to changing the icon that's used for Connect in the menu bar. So when I click on Connect, a sign-in window is going to open up, and it prompts me for my network credentials. Now, I'm signing in here with an Okta account that has multi-factor enabled. So when I go to sign in, I'm going to see that option to choose what type of multi-factor challenge I want to be able to respond to. So in this case, it's set up for Okta push. So if I click OK, what I then get is a notification on my phone or my watch through Okta's Verify application. And then we see a notification actually in Connect, in this case showing me that I've successfully authenticated. So that notification, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. All right. The other thing I wanted to show before we take a quick break and let everyone get set up for their own demo is the new login experience in Jamf Connect. So you'll also be using this, but I've got a shortcut that I've created here to get my identity providers in Connect switched over from Okta to Azure AD. So I'll just click to enable that. Very good. So I'm going to sign out. Okay, great. So here I am at the brand new login experience for Jamf Connect. I can obviously see that I need to enter my Microsoft account credentials for login. So let me go ahead and do that. And like I showed with Okta, I have multi-factor authentication also enabled for my Azure account. So I'm able to go through that whole challenge and response process within the web view that we present during login. So now that I've done that, you can see that I've successfully authenticated, and now it's asking me for my local account password. So in this case, that is actually going to be the exact same thing as my Microsoft password. And I'm signed in. So that was all pretty quick, but I'm going to explain all of this and more when we get back in about 5 minutes, and you'll all have the opportunity to follow along with me from your own computer. Welcome back. So hopefully everyone is signed into their demo environment and can follow along as I walk through the Jamf Connect user experience for our 4 different identity providers: Microsoft Azure AD, Google Cloud Identity, Okta, and then finally OneLogin. We have demo accounts for you to sign into with each of the identity providers to hopefully make this easier. We've already gone through the effort of registering the applications with each of those providers, and the latest version of Connect is installed in the demo virtual machine environment. So click along and keep the accounts and their credentials handy for when you need to go through sign in. And again, we have everything set up to get you started relatively quickly. And we're going to get started here by opening up Jamf's self-service icon down on your dock. So you can see that we have a list of policies available for use with Jamf Connect. Each one enables Connect for the specified identity provider. So I'm going to walk through them in order and take time to describe some notable features about each of them. So let's start with Azure AD for Connect. When I click to enable really any one of these policies, what you're going to see is a description as well as the example accounts that we can use to sign in and then create local accounts with these identity providers. These accounts all share the same credentials and they do not have multi-factor authentication enabled, so we shouldn't get stuck. After clicking to run the policy for Azure AD, we can see a notification in the upper right-hand corner here under Macs that we've now enabled Connect for an Azure account login. Now, at this point, it's instructing us to log out, but real quick, but I want to point out what this policy really did. So if we go into System Preferences and click on Profiles, we're going to see 2 new profiles have been installed. One each for Connect's login window plugin, and then another for the menu bar application. So we can always come back to our example configuration profiles. But briefly, these profiles are what we can create and push to the Manage Macs via MDM. So you'll see all the managed settings used to configure the Jamf Connect experience. And this includes primarily the name of the identity provider, as well as the client application ID that's used to register Jamf Connect within that identity provider. One thing I want to note here is that we rely on different preference domains for each of the experiences, and that while login's profile format remains unchanged from prior versions of Jamf Connect, the new menu bar app preferences are all new. If you have existing profiles for sync and verify, when you go to import them, you're going to want to review the new format and update it all for the new application. So I think we're ready to get going. And let's just start by simply signing out of our account. Great. So we're going to sign in with our Azure demo account. Simply azure1.jnuc@jamfse.io. And as we're going through these sign-ins, if you encounter any problems signing in with one of the demo accounts, there is a backup account to use as well. Just replace the 1 with a 2. So in this case, azure2.jnuc@jamfse.io is also a perfectly valid set of credentials. So use one of those 2 email addresses. Both have the same privileges and everything. So email entered, asking us for a password. The password in this case is just simply JNUC2020 JNUC 2020, all lowercase. And hit sign in. Okay, so kind of similar to what you'd seen with my login before with my own personal account. One feature I want to point out here is new with Jamf Connect, and that's the step indicator that's being displayed at the top of the screen. When we're signing into accounts using OpenID Connect application registrations, there's a two-step process involved where we need to first authenticate and authorize the user for sign-in. This first step involves all the sign-in and security challenges that are needed to satisfy the identity provider that we are who we say we are, and this is what allows the login process to actually proceed. But when that is done, that authentication process success is represented by this green check mark that's displayed now in our step indicator. And so we can see that we've moved beyond authentication and proceeded to the password verification step. So once we get the thumbs up from the identity provider about our authentication, we need to complete the local login process by validating the password for that local account. If this is a brand new local account, this means we're going to be asked to create a local password. If the identity provider that you're using supports the resource owner password credentials grant, then we can validate the password that's being used for the local account that it matches the user's account in the identity provider. So with each subsequent login, we'll continue to ask the user to enter their local password in this second verification step. So again, we can just enter our Microsoft accounts password, JNUC 2020, JNUC 2020, all lowercase. And once entered, we get the green check mark once more. So Connect at this point is beginning to create the new local user account. The account is created with local permissions based on specific attributes that are defined by the admin and then returned to Connect through the user's ID token from the identity provider. This gives us an ability to determine which users are granted administrative privileges or those who will be created as standard users. Awesome. So we're signed in, and we can see that Jamf Connect is actually already open, and that I have the ability here to now sign in. So this piece could be automated with keychain entries, but again, for the sake of demo, we're just going to sign in again with our demo account's credentials. So username azure1.jnuc, JNUC at jamfse.io. Our password, again, simply JNUC 2020. Okay, so now that I've signed in successfully, there's that notification that I had alluded to earlier, and it's telling us that our sign-in was in fact successful. So this isn't something that you should expect to see in your own deployments, but it's an example of some of the extensibility that's built into Jamf Connect. So I'll click OK. But actually, we're going to go back to our configuration profile from earlier. So if I go into System Preferences, Profiles, and look at our Jamf Connect settings, I've got two keys here, the on-auth success and the on-auth failure keys. And what those keys do are allow us as admins to define file paths for scripts that I want to have run in each of those two scenarios. My script for this demo was a simple instruction for the Jamf helper binary to display notification, but there really is no limitation involved there. The other thing to keep in mind is that our Connect menu bar app is continuously validating the local password for the user against the user's account in the identity provider, much the same as what we would do during the login process. So by default, the recurrence of that password check is every 15 minutes, but that can be adjusted to as frequent or as infrequent as you like, or completely turned off. That also means that my scripts will run just as frequently. So depending on the authentication, keep that in mind. Because we're continuously validating the password used for authentication, we'll be able to catch when network passwords have expired or have been changed or even reset from another device. Connect at that point is going to prompt the users to re-enter their local account password, the current local account password, so that it can be updated to match the current network password. The other thing to note about the demo accounts that we're working with is that they are actually configured to retrieve Kerberos tickets from Active Directory when it's available. So this gives us an opportunity to query Active Directory for other attributes about the user and their account. So items like password expiration date, alternate names, AD group membership, that information can all be cached locally on the Mac. So after I've signed in to Connect, I can open up, let's say, Ticket Viewer on the Mac. And I can see that I, in fact, already have an active Kerberos ticket as a result of that sign-in. If I want to see what other known attributes there are about my user account that have been cached locally, then we can go to Library Preferences, and there's a new file that's been created with the new Connect application, the com.jamf.connect.state plist, that contains all of those values that you may be interested in, may want to look into a little bit further. Awesome. So we're going to go back to self-service. And we're going to enable Connect for Google Cloud Identity so we can see what the login experience is like with one of our Google accounts. So again, we've got a little description. We can see the sample accounts that you can use in this lab. And I'm going to click on Enable. Awesome. There's our notification. So we should be ready just to now sign out. So we're back in our login window, and the web view has been updated with our Google Cloud Identity login. We can see the step indicator still present at the top of the display. And in the top right is a menu for selecting and connecting to Wi-Fi networks. And then at the bottom, we have a couple helpful tools as well. Local login is available if you require offline access to the Mac and your account has this particular feature enabled. There's also a help button that can redirect your users to any website of your choosing. You can also define a file that would be used here in the case that the Mac is offline. So back to login. And we'll sign in with our JNUC demo account and password. Now, we have different accounts for each of the different identity providers, but you may notice a theme. In this case, our account is just going to be google1.jnuc@jamfse.io. And it's going to ask us for a password. Again, shared credentials here, JNUC2020, all lowercase. Hit sign in. Now with Google, there's an OAuth consent screen that the user accepts in order to continue. So I'll click allow. And now we'll see a green checkmark at the top of the screen that authentication to Google has completed successfully. So we've moved on to the verify step. And now we're being asked to create a new password for our local account. Unlike Azure AD and most of the other OpenID Connect compatible identity providers, Google Cloud Identity does not support the resource owner password credentials grant. This means we cannot sync our local account passwords directly with Google accounts. Now, if the source of truth for your user accounts is actually elsewhere in your environment, then it's worth researching whether you could use this verification step to perform the credentials grant flow against that secondary identity provider in order to validate the local password. So in this case, we're just going to create a new password for the local account that'll be used for the password verification step in all future login attempts. But it'll also be used for the local keychain as well as file vault in the case that that's enabled. Now, there's nothing that's preventing me from just simply reusing my Google account password here in this step, but you just need to recognize that it's independent from the network account and it will not be kept in sync. So should your Google account password change, that's not syncing. So you really have to think of this as a local PIN that'll be used only on this Mac for local authentication purposes. Now, as we go to create the account, it's going to take about 30 to 45 seconds for the account creation process to actually complete. So we'll give that just a quick moment here. Awesome. So now that we're signed in, you'll see that I actually have Connect open already, but it's not configured for any particular identity provider. Again, because Google Cloud Identity doesn't support the password credentials grant, we cannot validate the local password against the Google account if Google is acting as the source of truth for our users' credentials. And again, if your environment does have a secondary credential provider available, say if your accounts are actually synced between Azure AD and Google Cloud Identity, then it's entirely feasible to set up that second provider's OpenID Connect application for use with the password credentials grant so that you can take advantage of password syncing and remediation features within Connect. Another option would actually be to use our open source app, Nomad, in place of the Jamf Connect menu bar app in cases where on-premise Active Directory can act as that source of truth for credentials. By its nature of being on-premise, Active Directory isn't going to be globally available like a cloud identity provider would, but if your users are commonly required to connect to your corporate network, or if they connect to a VPN, then pairing Connect with Google for login and Nomad with Active Directory for password synchronization, then you may be able to get the features and all the access that you actually need. Great. So we're going to go back into self-service, and this time we'll set up Connect for Okta. Okay, so once enabled, we'll log out of our user account. And when we get back to our login window, you may notice that things look a little different. And that's because there's no step indicator and there's no web view for signing in with Okta accounts. So with Okta, we don't use OpenID Connect applications for authentication, though you could if you wanted. Instead, our recommended flow takes advantage of Okta's unique authentication API to authenticate users and then step them through multi-factor challenges. So this process cuts down on the number of times that we have to request users enter their password, but it still provides us the same opportunities to update the local password in case the network password has changed or it has expired. So we're going to sign in. And again, because this account doesn't require multi-factor authentication, we'll go right into account creation. Our account this time is okta1.jnuc@jamfse.io. Again, the password JNUC2020. If you're having any issues signing into any of these accounts, switch the 1 for a 2 again and try that secondary backup account instead. Excellent. Now that we're signed in, I can go to the Connect menu and sign into my account. Now, I don't have this enabled here, but as an admin, you could open up this window via configuration and more or less force users to sign in, as at that point, you actually wouldn't be able to close the window until you follow through with a successful sign-in process. And just for the sake of demonstration, I'm actually going to mistype the password just to see what that on-auth failure script looks like that I've added to the demo. So slightly different notification there. Cool. So let's sign in with the real password this time. Get the success notification. Now, with this successful authentication, you'll see one other feature that can be enabled, and that is that when a user successfully authenticates to Okta, we will log them into their Okta dashboard in their browser of choice. So if you've used Connect in the past with Okta, You may be familiar with this. You may also be noticing something that is not there, and that missing item is the browser extensions. So as we anticipate that individual identity providers are going to begin supporting Apple's single sign-on extension framework, we've added the ability for Jamf Connect to validate the Okta passwords in the background on a recurring basis instead. So with that new capability, it's no longer necessary for us to have a browser extension in order to be used to validate those Okta passwords that are saved within the keychain. Awesome. So I think we can leave Safari and go back into self-service. And I want to enable Connect for our final example identity provider, and that is OneLogin. All good. Close, 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 out. So we'll sign in with our example accounts again. OneLogin, one.jnuc at jamfse.io, JNUC 2020. And now OneLogin also supports the password credentials grant. So we have now the opportunity to sync up our passwords here, and then that password will be used to create the local user account. Now with OneLogin, we're back to using an OpenID Connect application to handle authentication and authorization. And kind of here's what I love about OneLogin. As far as setting up Connect is concerned, it's low fuss and it's a pure OpenID Connect setup. So that means if you're out there with an identity provider that isn't on our list of officially supported providers, OneLogin sets a pretty good benchmark of what you could expect if you find a way to register OpenID Connect apps within your identity provider. All right, so now that we're signed in, we'll do our typical sign in through the Connect menu. And we see our success message, and we know that our passwords are, in fact, in sync. So with that, that's everything I had planned to walk through in our lab today. I hope that you got a chance to experience some of the new and some of the classic parts of our Connect apps, as well as get a better understanding of how the app can fit into the workflows for the different identity providers. We're really excited to get our new apps in your hands and are eager to listen for your feedback. So feel free to keep poking around at the apps in this demo environment and ask us questions inside the Q&A. We have an opportunity for you to provide feedback on this session as well, so please go ahead and follow through with that. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of this year's JNUC. Thank you.